Yeah, so after that swim, I I drove the rest of the off-road trails and then up onto Route 41 through the beautiful, this is the most beautiful highway I've ever seen. It's all banked curves and it's all up and down and curving and like this way and that and all of the forest changes. And it's something like if you had a sports car, like that would be like a dream road. And unfortunately for me, I had the tires aired down to 20 psi, so I couldn't really go at the turns the way I wanted. But the uphills, you could just unload. You could just completely floor it, third gear. It'd be screaming at like 4,700 RPM, and like just laying down horsepower, 70 miles an hour, just unbelievably fun. And then like come down on the other side of the mountain, boom, you're flying, and then there's a curve at the bottom of it, just epic. So then I got into the town of Copper Bay, and it was getting later, so I wanted to make sure that I got to the campground. So I drove straight out, and I thought, okay, the map says like it's gonna, like the map didn't say how many miles it was of this off-road trail. And so I just drove to the very end. Actually the beginning of Route 41 is at the beginning of this trail is the beginning of Route 41. So as Route 41 ends for me, which is actually the beginning of 41, it's the beginning of the trail that leads to High Rock Bay. So I get on this trail and it was probably like 7:45. So I needed to like kind of hurry up and go so I could get the camp set up and like get a fire started so I could eat. And so I was like going on this trail, and I was like probably about like all of a sudden it had been 18 miles, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is not right. I'm like, I thought this trail was something like 10 miles or something like that. And so then I just had the gut feeling like there's no phone service, so you can't look on the Google Earth, you can't like see where you're at. So I was just like, all right, I got to turn around. So I just turned around, and then it turned out like I drove way, way, way back. I went so far out of the way. It was unbelievable. It was ridiculous. And then it was like sunset, like the sun was setting, and I was like, oh crap. Um, and I just thought I was using the compass, and I thought, okay, I have to go straight east. So I saw a trail that turned right, and that was east. And I was like, this has got to be the trail that I must have missed it. And so, yeah, I had missed it. It was that trail. And then that led me all the way out. There's a bunch of branches of the trails going all throughout the whole area. So you just don't know exactly. Like they have signs, but there's not always a sign. And anyways, so I pull out to the very tip of the Keweenaw Peninsula, High Rock Bay, and it was like 9 o'clock, and the sun was setting, and I like quickly like busted out the tent and busted out the wood, and like luckily I had went and chopped up some wood. There was a lot of logging stuff, so I chopped up some wood on my way there and put it in the back. So I had wood, I had everything set up, and I had like I had birch bark for tinder. So I immediately like got the fire set up, boom, 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 boom. Got the tent set up, started the fire, and it was like the sun was just down and it was just dark, and I just had the fire up, and I put the pot of stew on, and then it got hot, and then I ate, and it was freezing cold. It was so cold. Oh my God, it was cold. And I didn't even want to get away from the fire, like I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. But then I did, and I went to sleep, and I woke up the next morning. It was really hard too. It was super windy, and the wind is coming from the north, and you can see Canada from the High Rock Bay position. Like you can see Canada. It's crazy. Like it's off in the distance, but you can see it, and you know that the wind is coming from there. So it's like ridiculously cold. And anyways, I woke up in the morning and I had no fire. I had no more firewood, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to eat, not going to be able to do anything. So I watched the sunrise, which was amazing. It was like a blood red sunrise. The whole entire place lit up red. And the people who were in the campground there, which was like two other people, They were still asleep. They didn't see it, but I got to watch that, and I was right on the tip. Like, I mean, you can see where I'm at right now. Like, this is, it's just on the edge. And so I worked out on the edge. Like, I started out 200 jumping jacks, like 50 push-ups, and then I started curling, and I started lifting and pumping and pumping and pumping, and I got super pumped up. I was so pumped. I was extremely pumped. And then I was real hot. So then I was like, the cold wind was blowing on me, and I'm like just working out like extreme, you know what I mean? I was so pumped up. And I was like, this is epic. And I just felt like I felt so good. So then I decided that I needed to go into the town and see if I could find like a map of the trail system. So I went into the town and I looked around through the town. Oh, I got gas, and they have above ground gas containers. And so I didn't know this, but the gas pumps so fast. It filled up the truck so quickly. It was like 10 seconds. And because it was so quickly, like I thought that the pump wasn't working. I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. So I kept like, even though the automatic shutoff went on, I kept like trying to pump more and pump more, and it spilled out over the evaporation valve, and it spilled a huge puddle of gas. I was like, oh man. So then I went into the gas station, talked to that guy, and he was like, oh, you spilled gas all over the floor. And then everybody was like, yeah, you spilled gas. And I was like, yeah, okay, I gotcha. And then I went then I went to the shop, and I got some something to drink. And then I went up on top of the mountain, and like on top of the mountain the phone worked, and I was surprised. So I made some phone calls to people and said things, talked, and looked on top of the mountain. It was amazing. It was peaceful. It was like a 360-degree view. So this mountain had like, you could see every direction. You could see the whole from one side of Lake Superior on the peninsula to the other side, and you could see all of the forest in between. It was so amazing. So I stayed up there for a while, and the ride up that thing was crazy. Like this is like the Upper Peninsula. This isn't like California Yosemite National State Park where they have like guardrails everywhere. Like this place is like, if you fall, if like there's the cliff there, like go ahead, like if you fall off the cliff, it's your own fault. There's no safety precautions, and the drive, the road to get up the mountain is like so steep. The grades of like it's like not even like switchbacks. It's like grades. It just big straight up, and then it flattens out for a while, and then another big straight up. It was so crazy. It was actually scary. It was like, man, some of these people, like I don't know how they like drive up this. People are so bad at driving. Like that's not like a little mess around place. It's like that's a serious, it's a seriously dangerous road. So, anyways, I'm up on top of there, and then I'm like, okay, I'm coming down. And then I came down, and I had bought a map at the little, mart or whatever you call it. And I got a map, an ATV trail map. So then I decided I would go and check out the trails. So I checked out the trails for the rest of the day. And then I went back to the High Rock Bay camp spot, and I got got my food, got my camp set up, got my fire started, got everything taken care of, and then watched the waves hit the beach for the rest of that night. And then I went to sleep, woke up, and then I was like, oh, I got to start to see some other areas. So then I went I went down Route 26, which was amazing. And as I was going down 26, like I found other places that I wanted to go. So basically, like I was on like an expeditionary. Like I would use one day to like just drive and like kind of see where stuff is at, and then the next day I would like explore. So this day was like a driving day. So I drove into a town called Tamarack. And Tamarack was the most impressive town that I've seen. Tamarack is the one. If you go to the Upper Peninsula, then you need to go to Tamarack. Like, if you like to see, amazing old-timey towns, I ate at a place called the Michigan House. And it was like a hotel that they built in 1903. And it was still decorated with the same decoration. And it was, like, upkept really well. And, like, oh man, it was so immaculate. Like you just see the craftsmanship of everything was so ornate and detailed, and like it was, American, like how you think Americans should be. You know what I mean? Like when you think made in America, like that's the place. Like you go into there and you're like, this place was built in 1903. It looks like it was just built. Just beautiful. And I ate there, and like they had they had beef from the local farm. They had like local produce and local beef. And so I was like, this is amazing. I had a hamburger. It was real good. And then from there, I went back, instead of going to the High Rock Bay point, because it was freezing again, I drove back to the town of Gay, where they have the rustic campground, because the wind was coming in from the north, and that other campground is a little bit more blocked. The other campground was bad when the wind was coming from the east. So strategically, that was the place to camp for the night. So I camped there, and it was again like another beautiful night of freezing cold. And then, but from there, the next day, I drove like this huge, like 35-mile long off-road trek from the town of Gay along the, I guess it would be considered the southern part of the peninsula. Like the peninsula goes up like this, and so the peninsula comes out and it makes a curve. So I was like right here in the town of Gay, and then I went all along this side, which was different because most of everything else is on like the northern side of the peninsula. So this was like really isolated. There was like waterfalls everywhere. There was springs. And then I was driving up to try to get to this place where I'm at right now, which I couldn't get to the whole time. It was like everything was keeping me from this. Look at this place. I mean, like, come on, dude. This is unreal. But anyways, let me fix that now. So I was trying to get to this place, and I was driving these off-road trails, and like a lot of times what happens is they'll have like a gate, and like there's like a gate is closed, and there's no sign, and there's no warning. You've already driven like miles and miles and miles, and then all of a sudden there's a gate, and it's like locked. And that's what happened. At the Montreal Falls is where I was trying to get, which is just like right over, not too far away from where I'm standing right now. And so I want to do some fishing. But anyways, so there was a gate, so I had to go all the way back, and then I was like, screw this. So then I just started to navigate with my compass, and I tried to find a way around the gate. So I was like off-roading all these trails back up in the real high altitude in this mountain. I think it's like not real high, but for around here, I think it was like 1,900 feet elevation. And it was some serious. There was like creek crossings. There was like just a bunch of like ridiculous stuff, and I had to turn around because it got to a point where it was too crazy, and I didn't have the winch, and I was like, nah, if I get stuck or I break the truck, I'm in the middle of nowhere. No one's coming to help me. So I decided, all right, forget about it. So then I drove back. I left up out of there, and I went back to the High Rock Bay camp. And actually, I didn't go back to the High Rock Bay camp because it was too late by that point. I went to the, I stealth camped. I went by this, like, on Route 41, and I found, like, a nice pull-off that looked like nobody would go up that. And so I pulled up into that, and I camped there for the night in the Jeep. And I saw a wolf, like a big gray wolf. It was beautiful. And I saw a bunch of turkeys and all kinds of like wildlife at that spot. And I slept in the Jeep. And then I woke up in the morning and I went to the dunes. And that had been when I was exploring the day that I went to the Tamarack town. I had seen that they had some dunes there. So I was like, okay, I gotta go to the dunes. So I went all the way, like there was a big detour because part of this one road was closed. So you had to go all the way around. So I went all the way around to the beginning of Route 26. And on that way, going down that is the whole coastline. That's the Northern Coastline Drive. That drive is the best drive I've ever driven. It's all curves and bends, and it goes out, and there's beaches and everything. Just like, complete dream drive. And on the way, there was like a monastery, like a big monastery, and they had a bakery. And I was like, oh, okay, I gotta check this out, So I go in there, and like they had like all sorts of like, real good. So I bought a bunch of bakery stuff. I got like almond sugar cookies and cheesecake. What's it called? Cheesecake cupcakes and German chocolate fudge brownie and an apricot cupcake. And I went to the dunes and I ate that cheesecake cupcake first because that thing was ridiculously good. So then I got to the dunes, nobody was there. I was like, all right, this is amazing. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna climb around on the dunes and all this stuff. And then I was like, I climbed up the dunes and I was like, oh, this is like, I'm pretty tired because I didn't really get that great of sleep the night before. So then I just laid down on the dune and like suntan for a while, and then I was feeling pretty good. And then I got up, and like on the other side of this huge dune, like all behind it was all these other dunes, but they were covered with pine trees. But on the other side of this big giant dune was a pond. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go down there and check out this pond, So I like ran down the dune, like that, which was amazing. And then I get down to the pond. It's not a pond. It's like water saturation. Like there's so much water in the ground that it's like it like swells up. So this is like pure crystal clear, filtered through like the bedrock of the mountains around, like coming down and then filtered through the sand and then pushed up in like the lowest point of the sand dunes. So I'm like, oh, I can't pass this up. So like I just stripped naked and like just dove in that thing, and I swam it around. It was cold. I was like, woo! And yeah, that was like, oh man, but it was so good. It was like ridiculous. And then so I was like, oh well, no, what are they gonna do if they come around here? Somebody comes over here, so what? Like, you know what I mean? So I just was like, then I was like, okay, I'll just go on a hike a little bit. And so I just went on a hike a little bit, like completely naked. I was like, yeah, all right. So I went like maybe about a mile around in the dunes behind the big dune. And I was just like, yeah, I'm just not going to put on any clothes. And then I went back to that pond, and I jumped back in there to get all the sand off me, and then put my clothes back on, and then got out and went through Eagle Harbor, which was like, not that big of a deal, and then went out to High Rock Bay. And this time I went and I did the trail called the Point, and that trail had like waterfalls on it. It had a spring-fed pool, a cascading pool of a spring water. And so like I mentally noted that, because I was like, oh, this is where I'm definitely gonna like have a bath. And anyway, so like I went up and did that trail was really, really crazy, and it led out to some. The trail driving itself took like hours, and it led out to some geological feature on Lake Superior where I guess like this huge mass got pushed up. This big massive piece of bedrock got pushed up onto the coast, and so it's like this big block of bedrock that's like looks like, like this. Like here's the coast, and then the bedrock is like coming up like this. Crazy. So I stayed there. It was real cold though. Like the wind was blowing extremely. So I was like, all right, this is getting too much for me. So then I went back to the High Rock Bay camp spot, and I camped there, and that was yesterday. And today, because I drove a couple different trails, now I understand that like there's like a million little trails that like branch off and go around towards each other. Today I tried to get to this place where I'm at now, which is Fish Cove, and it took me the whole entire day. It took me all day. I had to go up and down all these little tiny trails, every which way, this and that, and this and that, and this and that. And it was like, there was like a huge down tree, or there was like all this stuff. And I ended up going through some extremely deep mud, like an unsuspectingly, like, I'm just driving along, and like, the bottom of the trail is like got rocks. So there's mud over it, but there's like rocks underneath. So it's like, you're like, it's okay. You know what I mean? But then I came up to this spot, which was deceptive. And for some reason, I like looked at it and I was like, oh, it looks like, it looks deep here. And I've been driving around in two-wheel drive the whole time, because like you don't really need four-wheel drive unless, you need four-wheel drive. And so I decided to put it into four-wheel drive. And that was the correct decision, because as soon as my front tires went in there, it dropped down like a foot, at least a foot. Like I'm like maybe underestimating it. And when it did that drop down, it wasn't like you were just dropping down in water. It was mud. It was slush mud. And it was like a soft bottom. So there was zero traction. So immediately I put my foot to the floor and just wide open, and I barely made it out of there. Like that was like, it was probably about 15 yards, maybe 12 yards of ruts. And I almost didn't make it out of there. That was the most closest that I've come to being stuck on this whole trip. And it was real bad. It was real. And after I got out of it, I was like, oh. And then I was freaked out a little bit, so I had to like stop, because I like actually was like, oh, I almost just got in big trouble with the Jeep. And so then I'm going down the trail some more. And I'm like, this is a dangerous trail, so I gotta, be, on point. And then there was another huge mud pit, and I was like, oh shit. And this one, there was like 3 down trees, and they were huge, that were across the trail. So I was like, oh no, I have to turn around and go back through that mud pit that I almost got stuck in. Oh, dude. So I was like, all right, you got to do what you got to do. And then so I turned around, and like I told you earlier in this talk, that when you go to do these turnarounds, that like as soon as you pull off of the little 1-lane path, like you sink. So the turnarounds are super dangerous, and this was an already like deep, muddy, mucky area, and I was like, oh no. So I carefully turned around, And then I went through that mud hole again, but this time I filmed it because I was like, you know what? I should film some of these things when I'm doing. And so I filmed it, and I got through. I got through. It doesn't look as hard like on the film as it was in the truck. Like in the truck, that was very like, you know, I've been off-roading for a long, long time, for more than 20 years, actually, for like 23 or 20 something like that, 20 plus years. And I know when you're about to get stuck. I've been stuck. Okay. That was about to get stuck. That was serious mud. And anyway, so I had to go back through that, and then I had to get around, and I had to go and navigate all these things and using the compass, and then the trails are confusing because it's hard to like orient yourself because of the way that the map looks. Like they don't have the map orientation done very well. Anyways, and I was keep on going up and down, little pass, up and down, up and down. I had to keep turning around, like they would dead end, or they would like be like covered in trees that like you couldn't get through anymore, or there would be like a big huge hole, where like a logging truck like went and dug a hole so that you can't get past it anymore. So finally, like after all of that, like going back and forth and looking, like I was enjoying myself the whole time. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, oh, it's just about the journey. And I didn't even think about the destination. The destination was arbitrary at this point. It was just like exploring and seeing if I could navigate the way through. And I did. And I got to this place, and I can't even believe like this place. Let's go this way. This place is immaculate. Like the sun is setting right now. You know what I mean? Like right over the mountains. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Would you look at it? And that is the story up until this point. And I don't know exactly when I'm going to go home yet. I think in the next day or two. But I just wanted to like put this all on video so that I would remember everything. Obviously, tons more stuff was going on. Like, I can't even, this is already like 2 30-minute long videos. So, I'll talk to you guys later.